you have got to do everything that you can to keep your good employees. Dan Clark is famous for saying, if they come for money, they'll leave for money. And
Mm,
so I
that's
don't think
good.
that money is your key differentiator. It's
Yeah.
all these other things. So, and we've used the word retention for a long time. Lately, I've been using and enjoying the term belonging because I think belonging is kind of a deeper word with that.
This is Dental All Stars, where we bring you the best in dentistry on marketing, management, and training.
Welcome to Dental All Stars. I'm Eric Vickery, president of coaching at All Star Dental Academy, and I'm excited today to interview our guest, Alan Twigg. My friend, Alan Twigg, president of Bent Ericksen, an HR company in dentistry, as you probably know. He's a trusted partner. Bent Ericksen is a trusted partner of All Star Dental Academy, of course. You know, that's why they're on here. We already know Bent Ericksen knows their stuff when it comes to HR and dentistry. And so today we're just going to talk about HR in dentistry in today, how he sees it, what's new, what's important, keeping good team members, the fight for that, and all things team. So welcome, Alan. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Happy to be here and happy to talk about my favorite topic, which is HR and all things HR, which I know is not everyone else's most favorite topic, but happy to talk about it because it is important.
I'm that guy with my friends who are always wondering, what do you do? Does that happen with your friends outside of dentistry? What do you do?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've had people my next door neighbor thought I was a math teacher for a while, and then someone else thought I was like I was an actual dentist or something
Yeah.
because they had heard that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure you get
Yeah.
that a lot too.
Yes. Yeah. You know, thinking that if I'm a consultant for dentistry, it has to do with telling dentists how to fix teeth. I'm like, I didn't go to dental school. I can't tell them anything about that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, wonderful. So, let's just start out here. What is going on today in dentistry in terms of HR? What's the big topic?
Yeah, so I would say there are two main context things that I think about with this. So the first context is just that we're in a very tight labor market, and it's been that way since COVID. And though we're not seeing as much volatility as we were during COVID, where people were constantly changing jobs and leaving for 10 cents more an hour and all that,
Mhm.
we are still tight. There's just not enough qualified people out there for all the different positions, especially hygiene. So we're in a
Yeah.
tight labor market. That's context number one. Context number two is that every dentist I've ever talked to has goals. And those goals might be being more successful, however they define that. The goals could be a greater production of collections. Maybe it's fee for service. Maybe it's just revamping their technology, or just maybe it's just less stress, maybe just a better
Mm.
quality of life. So every dentist has goals. And it doesn't matter what those goals are. You need a really solid team supporting you in order to
Mhm.
achieve all of those goals. You cannot
Mm.
do all of that on your own. So you combine a tight labor market with these goals where you need a really good team, and we kind of have a problem, right? Because we
Mhm.
can't get the awesome people that we need necessarily, and yet we have all these goals. So what do we do? One of my big takeaways with that is you have got to do everything that you can to keep your good employees.
Yeah.
And we don't want to keep our bad employees. We're not interested in retaining everyone. It's only just our good employees, the people that align with our mission, vision, values, the people that are a good cultural fit, the people obviously that have the skill sets and everything. We want to keep all of them without a doubt. And some people use the word retention. We've used the word retention for a long time. Lately, I've been using and enjoying the term belonging because I think belonging is kind of a deeper word with that. We really want people who feel a sense of belonging with our practice. And that sense of belonging is what will keep people around. Paying at the top end of the market, paying a little bit more vacation than everyone else does, that ultimately is not going to keep people around long term. Yeah, there's the context.
Golden handcuffs, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm typing all sorts of questions right now. First question I have for you on the labor shortage. Is it going to turn around at some point? Can you see the future? You let me know. What does your crystal ball say?
Well, my crystal ball is not my crystal ball. My crystal ball comes from the ADA and then the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics. And ADA has been putting out these numbers for a couple of years, and it's basically looking at the next 10 years and what the projected need is for the number of dental assistants, hygienists, and so on that we'll need in dentistry each year. And then they also looked at how many graduates are coming out of accredited programs. And of course, there's this whole thing about state rules and accredited, versus, what you need and licensing and all that. But the bottom line is there is a massive, massive gap in those numbers. There's also expected to be a huge number of dental assistants retiring in the next 5 years, and same thing with hygienists. And of course, we saw a lot of retirement during COVID, and that is expected to continue. And so I don't see the problem getting better anytime soon. Even if we had some big downturn and a recession and all these people are laid off and looking for work and all that, we still need to get qualified candidates in.
There's school
And so,
for those positions.
school requirements and so on. I was at an event last year, and there was it was at the University of Washington Dental School, and there were some folks there from some hygiene schools. And of course, everyone has been chastising them of, why aren't you graduating more hygienists? And they said, our limiting factor is faculty. So they can't get enough faculty to teach. They said that we have plenty of applicants, we just don't have the faculty. So there's just all these little points where there's pinches in this. And so, crystal ball, I don't see it getting better anytime soon, unfortunately.
Okay. So because of that, I think what we hear, and this was another thing I typed out while you were talking about this, is I've got this bad apple and I'd rather keep the bad apple than have nobody. I hear this from our clients. How long do I put up with this person who, they're good at their job from a technical perspective, but their attitude is causing me to lose other people, or people don't want to come to work, and it's shifting the culture, all of those things that you and I talk about. So, I mean, how would you address that? How would you approach that? Say, I think your team would be happier without that person, even if it meant more workload, or do you risk it and go for it? Do you try to hire first, then let them go? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really tough one. There's no doubt about it. That's a really tough one. And so here's a bunch of random thoughts or random ideas with that. So one is, think about whether the attitude or cultural issues can be fixed. And maybe that fix is, maybe you've got someone working at the front desk who's just not a people person. And maybe they would be really happy in a cave in the back somewhere, just doing billing and collections, and they never have to interact with the general public. And maybe that is feasible for your office, and moving them back there makes them happy. It makes the rest of your team happy. The patients are happier. So there can be opportunities like that. You can maybe dabble in a little thing of going down a path of, well, why exactly is this person so unhappy and so disgruntled? That one's a little bit of a, veers off into, maybe there's mental health, maybe there's other things that, you don't really want to quite go there. Let's see. You mentioned this idea of, go ahead.
Well, I love that question, what you're just bringing up. What's it going to take for you to be happy working here? I'm not saying to say it that way, but that's the process of, hey, your one-on-one conversations with them, sitting down once a month. And our friend Robin Reese, of course, calls them the stay interviews. But there is a point where you've done all the things we've coached the client to do, and the person just, I don't know, for lack of a word, they're an Eeyore. They just don't want to change. They're just grumpy. They're Debbie Downer, grumpy Gus that comes in. At some point, I guess you're ejecting, you're pulling the cord, and you're letting them go, and then wondering how long is it going to take for me to find someone. I think that's really dependent upon the area you live in, of course. But would you say you give it everything you can, you throw everything you can at them to try to shift them, and then let them go and then hire? Is that pretty normal? Is it
there's certainly. They're certainly doing everything you can. If they end up being, like you said, an Eeyore, or as Amanda Gore would say, an energy vampire that just sucks the life out of everyone around them, that's probably something that you're never going to be able to change. And so then certainly with terminations, you always want to make sure you've got good documentation, solid, systems, records, etc. If you can get statements from other employees about working with this person, etc., that helps. One perspective to keep in mind on the workload is that, if you're unhappy with this person, chances are the rest of the team is really unhappy with this
That's
person.
good. Yeah.
And so this idea of letting the person go and then having this period of time where you're without, it may not actually be as bad as you think it is.
Mhm. Yeah.
We've had clients where they've let someone go thinking, "Oh my gosh, now everyone's going to be stressed out. Everyone's going to hate me and all that." And the rest of the team kind of goes, "Oh my gosh, thank you so
Mm.
much.
Mhm.
We now have this giant weight lifted off
Mhm.
of us. And now all of a sudden we can work. We're happier." And yeah, we recognize that there's going to be a few weeks, before we get a new person in there who's trained, blah, blah, blah. But it's worth it to us as the team to step up and work a little harder.
Yeah,
Because we
addition
definitely have
through
seen that
subtraction.
before too.
Yeah, okay.
And the
I
other thing
agree.
too, there was a study a while back that was looking at the effects of what happens when a really good employee quits versus what happens when a really bad employee quits. And what they found is that when a bad employee quits, the workplace doesn't really change or it actually gets better. When a good employee quits, it has a very noticeable negative effect. It almost like causes more turnover and more people to leave. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind is that with those bad employees, what's the message and the net effect that we're having on our good employees?
Yeah. I think the sure way of losing good employees is to keep that negative attitude around just because they're really good at their skill and they keep causing other good people to leave, but you're afraid to pull the trigger on this person. And there actually is this intimidation factor some employees have on their owners, their dentists, their leaders, and they're afraid to let them go.
Oh
And
yeah, big time.
you're talking about documentation and nobody should be surprised to be fired, but they're even afraid to have corrective conversations with them because they're running the show. We had a office manager and her husband, who was an assistant, had to be let go in the practice, and the team was clapping as they were yelling at the rest of the team while they were being let go together. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, it was just talk about everyone being happy that well, they didn't clap until they walked out the door, I should say, at the team meeting, but
Yeah.
they were, you see people's true colors when they're let go. And that's the moment that I think people are afraid of in terminating someone, that intimidation factor. And yet it's a moment of pain for a continuation of time of relief and positive direction, right?
Right. Yeah, big time. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in some ways, when we see this often where those problems have been kind of simmering and going on under the surface for a long time. And essentially what it is an unspoken agreement. The unspoken agreement is that this employee gets to do whatever they want and walk all over everyone and the doctor doesn't do anything about it. It's an unspoken agreement. And so yeah,
Mhm.
when someone finally says, "All right, I've changed my mind in a sense, this is now a problem
Yeah.
and I'm going to let you go," it's kind of understandable that, if you look at it from the employee's perspective, it's kind of understandable that they'd be upset because you're basically violating this unspoken agreement.
Yeah.
And there is some language that can be done around that, around, making it clear like, okay, the past is the past. This is now where we're at. And starting at this point, moving forward, this is what we are now going to do. I recognize that I have allowed this in the past. I recognize that this is now a change.
Mhm.
And ultimately, it's my practice, it's my name on the wall, and this is the new direction that we're going. And if people want to be, on board with that new direction, great. Happy to have you
Yeah.
come with me, but this is where we're going.
Could that be a group announcement, or is it always one-on-one with that, you know, T-Rex?
I think it depends on what's going on and how pervasive it is. If it's
Mhm.
just one person, maybe one-on-one is more appropriate. If it's multiple people or if it's
Mhm.
if it's a big thing, like sometimes when someone is implementing a new policy manual or revamping majorly their old one, and sometimes in that they want to kind of do a little bit of a refresh or a reset of expectations. And that can be a time that you do that, where you
Yeah.
just say, all right, look, guys, this is kind of the new direction. And it's usually kind of nice if you're doing that in conjunction with some other changes. We're updating our
Mhm.
technology, we're revamping,
Mhm.
it's all
Yeah.
kind of done as sort of, hey, here's sort of a big new refresh, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah. I love that. I love when we do culture commandments, core values, vision, mission, all those things. It's a great place to start doing that. And I don't like the term policing it, but basically what you're saying is here's what we're standing for, here's what we're not standing for. You do that as a group setting. And then in your one-on-ones, you can start saying, hey, this is, checks and balance time. This is our core value. This is where you are. Why is there a gap there? What can we do on a one-on-one basis to get it to work,
Mhm.
have the meeting, get it to work one-on-one. And then it's let them go. I have a question for you though. This is what I was typing out. I'm a team member. I'm listening to this. I'm listening to you talk about letting other team members go. And I'm listening to your podcast about that. But I'm a team member and I don't believe in gossip. I know our core value, our culture commandment is no gossip. And yet I'm living with this person of rage and I don't want to go to the doctor and tell on this person. But the doctor, she has no idea this is even going on. So how do I deal with that? Because I'm either gonna leave or this person needs to leave.
Mm.
And what would you say to that team member listening to this right now?
Yeah, so I would say, and this is something we challenge people on all the time, is let's get really clear about what we mean by gossip.
Mm,
Because gossiping about a patient's personal life, or
mhm,
even another employee's personal life, that's generally just not okay in any sort of context.
mm,
But in this case, this is about the workplace. This is about workplace conditions. This is about how you can be the most effective at your job. And sort of, just in the same way that if you've got a really uncomfortable chair that hurts your back and it hurts your ability to be productive during the day, another employee is like that uncomfortable chair that is limiting your ability to do your job and be effective. So in that realm, it's kind of about putting it in the context of these overall goals. It's like we want to have a practice that's successful. We want to have a practice where
mm,
everyone is doing their best work, where we all feel safe, all of those kinds of things. And it's kind of tying it into that.
mhm,
And I think there's also a little bit to it that says, look, I've tried, as the employee talking to the doctor, you can say, look, I mean, I consider myself to be pretty flexible. I feel like I can get along with most anyone, even people maybe I don't always agree with. I feel like I've really made the effort here to do everything I can to make this work. And
mhm,
I'm out of ideas, or I've run out of energy to try to make this work,
mhm,
or in a sense, every relationship is kind of give and take, and it's like I've done everything I can. I need the other person to move.
mm,
So those are all different things, but really, I think it all comes down to the overall context that we want to have a successful practice that all of us enjoy and is
mm.
profitable, and the patients get taken care of at a high level and all of that. And this is something that is hindering me in that.
Yeah. And having that one-on-one with the doctor with that conversation you're saying in that approach.
Yeah, and also having it, just approaching it as this is a we problem. This is not a me problem. This is not
Mm,
me,
mm,
I don't like the way that person looks kind of a thing.
mm.
This is impacting all of us because it's impacting my work, it's impacting the patients, it's impacting the practice. This is a bigger issue than just, a little annoyance with
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah, challenging. I think sometimes that team member's afraid of, is the right word retribution? I don't know what the right word is.
Retaliation.
Retaliation, that's it. I don't wanna go to you, the doctor, to talk to you about Alex, because I know you're gonna go talk to Alex, and the only person that would know the things I know is me, and now Alex is gonna have a hard time with me, and so I'm afraid. So I'd rather live in this place of, you know, unhealth, this unhealthy place versus dealing with it.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
tough.
and it is tricky because it does kinda depend on the context, depends on what's happened thus far. Has the employee talked to the other employee and said, "Hey, this is how I would like to be treated," or da da da. And it does kind of come into play sometimes when someone does confront the other person. How do they respond? Are they a victim and they're always blaming other people for everything and they never take responsibility? Maybe they do take responsibility, but they don't change. And so even though they say, I'm sorry, they keep doing it over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of kind of sifting through that as best you can. But I mean, in some ways, it just circles all the way back around to hiring and onboarding and making sure that in the hiring process, we are hiring for cultural fit and we're doing all of our due diligence and we're doing, assessments like the Drake or DISC. We're doing,
I was just
reference
typing
checking.
Drake.
Yeah.
I was just typing Drake, and I was going to throw you a curveball. I think. Let me ask you this: would the team taking the Drake, which we'll talk about in a second, would that give the leadership insight into problems that are happening there that they could maybe bring up themselves instead of having a team member bring it to them?
Possibly. Yeah,
Hmm.
it definitely can. Yeah, and you see that really extreme if, let's say, it's the example of two front desk employees, one of whom is very urgent, very much like, I want to get everything done right now, super quick, go, go, go.
Yeah.
And maybe they're paired with someone who is extremely detail oriented, extremely methodical, never wants to make a mistake. Everything has to be in the right,
Hmm.
box all the time.
Yeah.
Those two people will have inherently a little bit of a clash. And so
Mhm.
you can sometimes see that in the Drake and you can predict that. Uh, but sometimes some of these things, like, does someone have a victim mentality? Does it someone
Mhm.
blame other people all the time? Do they have a scarcity mindset? The
Mhm.
Drake, I don't know of any assessment that
Mhm.
can,
Yeah.
pinpoint that.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
experiential. Yeah, for
but
sure.
it's something that you can kind of get a sense of as you dig into behavioral based questions. So as you dig into questions around why someone left a previous job, maybe calling references, maybe doing some behavioral questions around, tell me about a time that you were not getting along with a coworker and what did you do and what was the outcome?
Mhm.
And if you find that you kind of start to see a pattern there where every answer is, oh, well, yeah, I had a conflict and it was because they were a jerk. And oh, yeah, I didn't get along with that manager because they were a jerk. And oh, I left that job because the doctor
Mhm.
was a jerk. It's like, okay, I'm seeing a theme here.
Mm. Yeah. So just because we're people are probably now thinking, what are you talking about, Drake? What does that mean? So talk about Bent Ericksen, all-star coaches, what we do there, maybe just a little flavor. We could come back and maybe expand upon that in another podcast. But just give
Yeah.
those that are wondering now, what is that Drake P3 thing that you just mentioned?
Yeah, sure. So the Drake, it's called the Drake P3 assessment. And the Drake it's a, for lack of a better term, it's a personality assessment. But it's really much more than that. It's a
Mhm.
deep communication and emotional intelligence assessment. It looks at base personality. It also looks at how someone is flexing in their current role. So, how they're trying to adapt to the role and adjust their personality to the role. It looks at people's primary motivators and demotivators in the workplace in terms of what sort of environments and workplace, situations, give them motivation or detract from that. It looks at leadership style, and a really big part of it is emotional intelligence. And it measures emotional intelligence both in terms of how aware someone is of their own emotions, and also then how aware and in tune they are with the emotions and the communication with other people.
Yeah.
So it's way cool. It's an assessment that we highly recommend for all of our clients. It's something that we try to recommend for anyone. It can be used both in the hiring process as well as done as a team building thing. And the team building side can be about communication, it can be about the emotional intelligence piece. It's really just about everyone kind of learning more about themselves. And then it's got some really neat tools that can be done around how you relate to other people and how they relate to you and communicating with each person on the team. And there's some
I
really neat
love that
stuff that
part
can
where
be done.
they'll get a breakdown of, hey, every single team member, this is how you communicate with that person. And then it flips. Every team member is, how do I communicate with every single team member in leadership and how to approach them? It's a great tool to have. And so if they're listening to this, they want to do that. What's the steps to do it? I know we're doing that at our May event. So people who are enrolled in our May event will get that. That's part of their tuition. But if they wanted to do this, say in coaching with All Star or whatever, what's the process like? Is it simple?
Yeah, super easy. So folks can really, it's about where you want to start. And there are a number of different ways to get involved. If you want to just dip your toe in it, then maybe the doctor, manager, leader, spouse, maybe you start there. Maybe it's just the doctor, maybe it's just the leadership team. You can kind of
Mhm.
dabble with that. There's information on our website at bentericksen.com about it. The next step might be incorporating it into the hiring process if you're planning on doing hiring in the near future. There's a whole bunch of really amazing tools with job matching and other things that can be done in the hiring process. If you're not planning on hiring anytime soon, you can consider doing some team building stuff with it. And that would be where everyone on the team does the Drake. And then it's these different communication tools and various things.
Mhm.
And there's a whole bunch of different things you can do with it. There's, just some basic stuff that you can cover. There's doing a whole workshop. You can do 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hour. You can do an all day workshop. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities with it.
Yeah. It's
Um,
so in depth.
yeah, and some
It's
offices
not
will
like,
just kind of cover like a couple things at once. Maybe
yeah,
we'll talk about personality, we'll talk about motivators and demotivators, and then that's it. And then maybe a
yeah.
month later we come back to it. Now we cover some of the other layers. So it's really a choose your own adventure kind of thing.
Okay. Wonderful. And we're a full support of it. We use DISC, we use strengths, we use EQ, and this is putting it all in one spot. So it's wonderful to see that
Yeah,
we have a tool like this and access to it.
for
Okay.
sure.
So let's pull back into belonging. I love that word, keeping good team members. How belonging? I talked about, and you talked about the golden handcuffs don't work because there's always gonna be someone who's gonna pay more.
Yeah.
So how do we keep good team members? And in that term belonging, how do we do that?
Yeah. So a few random strategies there. So one is investing a little bit in what we would call your people leadership. And, there's different types of leadership. And in this case, the people leadership is all about prioritizing retention, belonging, and appreciation among your employees and really truly supporting them. So I always use the analogy. I mean, it's like working out. You're not going to do one big project around culture or leadership or belonging or retention and do that one big
You're
project
done.
and then you're done forever. No, it's just going to be a steady thing. And this is kind of a, all day, every day, a little bit kind of a thing. So there are some basic things though that you can put in place that do make a difference. So believe it or not, one of the common reasons for turnover is misunderstandings. Misunderstandings about pay, benefits, timing, when someone is supposed to be eligible for PTO or in-house dental benefits. And that's where something like a really good, solid, up-to-date policy manual or employee handbook is really beneficial. And I know right off the bat that no dentist thinks that policy manuals are exciting or sexy or any of that. Totally get that. Um, and it's kind of like, I just mentioned, Blackberries or fax machines or something is kind of what it feels like. But there's something that Gallup does called the Q12, and it's 12 elements that
Love it.
are highly correlated with people having a sense of belonging and retention. The
Mhm.
very first item on the Q12 is I know what's expected of me at work. And that is one of the that is one of the most basic things you could possibly do is clearly communicate to your employees what your expectations are.
Yep.
Policy manual is a big part of that. So is job descriptions. And a big part of this is about fairness as well. It's all about creating an environment where, as the leader, we are fair and consistent over time in the same sort of situation. So it doesn't matter if we're having a good day or a bad day. It doesn't matter if the production is high or the production's low. We follow whatever we have as our established policy, our established protocol. And that creates fairness. It creates consistency because that fairness piece will kill morale and it will absolutely detract from the performance of your good employees. That's a big one. And another piece with this is compliance, because a lot of HR compliance, here's why HR compliance is different from OSHA compliance, HIPAA compliance, charting, record keeping. The reason that HR compliance is so different and impactful is because HR compliance directly impacts your employees. If there's some little thing that you're doing with infection control that maybe isn't quite totally, it doesn't directly impact your employees as much. But if you are in a state that has mandatory sick leave, if you have to do paid family leave, um, if there is overtime that's not being paid properly, those are the kinds of things that directly impact your employees. If someone is pregnant and they really do deserve a certain amount of time off because of a disability or a bed rest condition by the treating physician, and if you're not even aware of that,
Yeah.
those are the kinds of things that have an immediate effect on your employees. And just for a little bit of numbers about the whole compliance thing, this is something that has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. So in the period from 2015 through the end of 2019, we sent out 87 policy updates nationwide. So this was 87 new rules or changes to existing rules, and that was nationwide. During the period from 2020 through 2024, it was 259.
Yep.
So almost a four-fold
Four
increase.
times the number of
Yeah.
increased new
Yeah.
rules to follow. Wow.
And these are not just, boring, things that's like, I mean, these are things like paid sick leave, paid family leave, family and medical leave protections, pregnancy, disability accommodations. I mean, these are things that do directly impact your employees on a fairly regular basis. So good things to be aware of and really
Yeah.
important. So all of that factors into it. One other thing too that I'll just mention real quick is appreciation in the workplace. If folks aren't familiar with the book, The 5 Languages of
Yes.
Appreciation, get it. Super simple, short, easy to read book. If you're
Yes.
familiar with the 5 love languages, it's that concept applied to the workplace. It works really well for a dental office because there's just, you're strapped for time. You don't have a dedicated person who's spending 40 hours a week just doing HR and just doing it's designed for folks that have other things going on in their world. Really impactful though.
Yeah. If they're an all-star client, coaching client, they've been that for, at least 6 months. They know what this is as a doctor, leader, as a team, what all 5 of those appreciation languages are. And hopefully they are implementing them consistently. So let's go back to the top here. How to keep good team members. You said investing in your people leadership. I wrote, give them space for growth. And so really it's about in that one-on-one conversation, understanding, Alan is my team member. What's Alan's life vision? Do I really know what you're trying to accomplish in your life? Am I really connected with you on that? And do I see how my place of employment for you is helping you get closer to your vision? And also, if you're like, hey, this is where I want to be. And I said, okay, that's a version of Alan that's different than this version of Alan. What's that gap that's going to need for you to change, improve, grow to become that person? And maybe when you become that person, you're not even working for me anymore. But I know that if I support you in that growth pattern, my business benefits as you improve. The average, Gallup says, with the average American workers at their job, 4.4 years. And the average dental worker, am I have this right, 2.4 years? Does that sound right to you?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the last statistic I've seen. So we're not even as good as the average in America from employment standpoint. So stop worrying about helping people get better and better and better to eventually not be in your workplace anymore. They're already not going to be in your workplace anymore after about 2 or 3 years. So just pour into them, give them growth. I love that you said that. You talked about avoiding misunderstandings, have an employee handbook. I wrote down effective communication. That's a phrase I use a lot. Having effective communication, again, one-on-one team meetings, get time away from the dentistry so that you can do these important things. I love that. And then you really sent me down a rabbit hole on the Q12 by Gallup, the 12 questions by Gallup on what is expected of me at work. One of the biggest things Gallup is talking about is the lack of engagement in the U.S. workforce. Yeah. And so the statistic is, this is end of 2024, 31% of employees are engaged in their work.
That's it. Yeah.
31% are engaged, and 17% are actively disengaged. They're like on purpose trying not to do too much work. It's a job.
Yeah.
So this mirrors your three things, what we talk about. So lack of clarity and expectation. So we talk about clarity of expectation creates excellent execution. That requires effective communication. So only 46% of employees strongly agree that they know what is expected of them at work. Less
Yeah.
than half. That's important
Yeah.
for us to know. Perceived lack of care. 39% feel someone at work cares about them. So you're talking about appreciation languages. Only 39% feel like someone cares about them, which is down from 47% in 2020. And then insufficient development opportunities. We talked about room for growth, creating growth. Only 30% strongly agree that someone at work encourages their development, meaning my dentist isn't looking for ways for me to grow, pour into me. And
Right.
I gotta say, in defense of the dentist, sometimes it's the opposite. They're trying to provide training. They're trying to provide ways for them to grow, and they're in opposition of that. Do you have anything that you say to team members when it comes to, yeah, I really don't want to do CE, I don't want to do coaching, I don't want to do training, I don't want to do development? Is there a way to reach them on that? Is that just the wrong fit for the practice? Do you have anything that you try to get their attention with on that, or is that just, hey, we agree to disagree on that?
Well, again, I would come back to a little bit of digging deeper into why. Sometimes it's that the office is not paying for the CE.
That's right.
Sometimes it's that the office is closing the practice for a day or two that week. And so the employees are actually losing wages on a net
Yes.
basis.
This is huge.
We could totally get into a whole conversation though about the federal CE rules, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that people are not aware of that you actually do have to pay for.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's another podcast.
right. Yeah, that's a whole
That's
separate
another
thing.
podcast. Yep.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's about why. Is it also about why because maybe the class that the doctor wants them to go to is not something the employee is actually interested in? And also, why is that?
Okay.
And then, there is certainly an element where there are people out there who just kind of want to coast. And it's like they're doing what they're doing. They're fine with what they're doing. They don't need to learn anything about new technology or new techniques or whatever. They're
Yeah.
just like, I got this all figured out, you know?
Yeah.
And I think all of us are in a mode like that at various times in various parts of our lives with different things. If someone came to me right now and said, "Hey, you really need a new TV," I'd be like, "I don't need a new TV. My TV is fine."
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's also it circles all the way back around to hiring and fit. And it's like when we hire a new person in our job posting, are we making it very clear in the job posting and the interview process and everything that we are the type of office that does a lot of CE? We are always going, always changing, always improving. You put that out there on the front end,
good.
then hopefully in theory, you're not going to even hire someone who wants to just coast and not do anything.
Or go back to your culture commandments on your core values on this and look at the wall and say, look, this is what we agreed to. We're in constant growth. We're either growing or declining. So we're in a constant growth pattern. And that's what this is going to require to be employed here. Along with, we're going to make sure you're being compensated fairly and legally on everything that's supposed to happen. All right.
Sure.
So we got 2 minutes. We could probably spend 2 hours talking about the other things we want to talk about. I know. And so hopefully this was really valuable, but if you had to do a nice summary here of where you think this leads to for people on retaining, belonging, retaining really good employees for their practice. Anything you want to add to this to maybe until next time, we can walk away with something to grab here.
Yeah, I think just keep in mind the context of the tight labor market and where things are at and all your goals. You need people to achieve that. Be grateful for your awesome employees that are there. Show your appreciation to them. Don't take anyone, by all means, don't take anyone for granted right now, because a good, solid dental assistant, hygienist, team member, they could work anywhere. The fact that they're choosing to work for you is a massive gift for you. So, yeah, it's just about, and again, I'll just circle back to the whole exercise analogy. Just think of this as some little things that you're going to do here and there, not big, giant things. This doesn't take hours and hours and hours of time. This is just little things that you're going to start incorporating and building those habits as a leader so that that just becomes part of your everyday, regular old thing, along with everything else. And that over time will absolutely move the needle, because most practices just aren't doing this kind of stuff. They're just kind of skating by doing the bare minimum. And so those little things will absolutely set you apart.
That's right. That's right. And remember all the cliches and things that we say, they do matter. Making sure your employees feel great. That's not all on you, but you play a significant role in that. And I'm not just speaking to doctor leadership here. I'm talking to all team members. We play a role in this. So like your sign in the back, have a great day.
That's right.
Caution, good vibes.
That's
so
right.
Be a goldfish. These are all great things to bring, work on your core values, work on what you guys stand for. And that way it polices itself, for lack of a better term. Listen, there's a reason why Bent Ericksen is a trusted all-star partner. You guys are the best. You really know how to support dentistry in the HR world so well. We call on you a lot, and we really appreciate you. And thank you for being on the podcast today, Alan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
If someone
to help, happy to be here. Thank you.
If someone wants to reach out to you and get a hold of you, what's the email address?
Yeah, my email is Alan, ALAN, at bentericksen.com. Folks can reach out that way. We've got our 800 number on our website as well. So happy to help. So feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for joining us. And for those that have listened for this entire 40-minute podcast, I really appreciate you. You are growing. And so thank you for being here and pouring into yourself. And thank you for sharing this and putting this out there. If you know someone needs to listen to this, go ahead and share it with them. And remember to subscribe. And until next time, go out there and be an all-star.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Dental All Stars. Visit us online at allstardentalacademy.com.